Imagine a weapon so bizarre, so seemingly pulled from the pages of a comic book, that it defied all conventional logic of World War II. While the Manhattan Project scientists were harnessing the power of the atom, a small group of American researchers were pursuing a radically different, almost medieval form of warfare. Their target was not Japan's military-industrial complex, but its very cities, constructed largely of wood and paper. Their delivery system was not a long-range bomber, but one of nature's most misunderstood creatures, the bat. This was Project X-Ray, America's secret bat bomb. A plan to arm 1 million Mexican free-tailed bats with tiny, timed incendiary devices, release them over Japanese cities at dawn, and let them nest in the eaves and attics of a sleeping nation before setting it all ablaze in a simultaneous, unstoppable firestorm. It was a scheme that sounded like madness, but for a brief, shocking moment, it was a scheme that very nearly worked. This is the story of the ingenious, terrifying, and utterly bizarre weapon that almost burned Japan to the ground. In the aftermath of the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States was desperate for a way to strike back at the Japanese homeland. But conventional high-altitude bombing was proving tragically ineffective against Japan's dispersed cottage industry workshops. The famed Doolittle raid was a brilliant morale booster, but a tactical pinprick. The U.S. needed a way to inflict catastrophic damage, to bring the war home to the Japanese people in a way that shattered their will to fight. The problem was one of materials and architecture. Japanese cities were tinderboxes. Their buildings were made of wood, bamboo, and paper. A fire, once started, could race through entire blocks with terrifying speed. But starting that fire from 30,000 feet was hopelessly imprecise. They needed a way to place the spark not just on the roof, but deep within the hidden, vulnerable heart of the structures. They needed a weapon that could find its own way inside. The stakes were the future of the air war. The firebombing campaigns that would later define the Pacific conflict, led by General Curtis LeMay, were in their infancy. The concept of area bombing was controversial, but the strategic imperative was clear: break Japan's industrial capacity by any means necessary. The consequence of failure was a protracted, bloody invasion of the home islands, an operation projected to cost millions of lives. The pressure to find the decisive, unconventional advantage was immense. The Office of Scientific Research and Development was exploring every possible avenue, no matter how outlandish. And into this vacuum of desperation stepped a man with a truly wild idea. A dental surgeon from Pennsylvania, who, while watching bats emerge from caves in the Southwest, saw not creatures of the night, but the perfect, living, guided missiles. The man with this astonishing idea was Dr. Lytle S. Adams, a dental surgeon from Irwin, Pennsylvania. Adams was no military strategist, but he was a prolific inventor and a friend of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. While driving back from a vacation to the Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, he had been mesmerized by the spectacle of millions of bats emerging at dusk, a swirling, living river of creatures that seemed to vanish into the landscape. In that moment, a bizarre connection fired in his brain. He knew of Japan's vulnerable wooden cities. He knew that bats could carry many times their own body weight. What if, he wondered, you could load a bat with a tiny firebomb? What if you could release 1 million of them over a city? They would instinctively seek shelter in the dark, confined spaces of buildings, in the attics, the eaves, the walls, and then, on a timer, they would ignite. The resulting fires would start not on rooftops, but from within, sprouting simultaneously from thousands of separate points, making firefighting impossible. It was a plan of terrifying, elegant simplicity. Adams's crazy idea was to weaponize nature itself. He proposed capturing millions of Mexican free-tailed bats from the southwestern caves. These bats were perfect. They were small, but could carry a 1-ounce payload. They hibernated, making them easy to transport in a dormant state, and they were abundant. The bomb itself was a masterpiece of miniaturization, a small nitrocellulose case filled with a thickened jellied gasoline, an early version of napalm, fitted with a timed fuse triggered by a spring wire that would gnaw through a string. The bats would be loaded into a special cylindrical cage which would be dropped by parachute from a bomber at 5,000 feet. The cage would open automatically, releasing the bats to fly away and find their hiding places. The chaos would be absolute. The conflict was immediate and visceral. When Adams managed to get his proposal to the White House, it landed on the desk of the president's most trusted science advisor, who promptly declared it, and we quote, "the wildest idea I have ever seen." The National Defense Research Committee was skeptical to the point of ridicule. The opposition wasn't just about the strangeness, it was about practicality and control. This was biological warfare, albeit with incendiaries. How do you train a bat? How do you ensure they don't just fly back to the American ships? The very concept of relying on the unpredictable behavior of wild animals was anathema to the military mindset, which demanded precision and obedience. It was insane. But one man saw past the absurdity. President Franklin D. Roosevelt himself, who, intrigued by the sheer audacity of the plan, scrawled a simple, fateful memo. "This man is not a nut. Try it." And with that, Project X-Ray was born, a secret weapon program that would pit the methodical world of military science against the untamable instincts of the night. But taming nature for war is no simple task. The man tasked with making this madness work was Dr. Louis Fieser, a brilliant Harvard chemist who had just invented napalm. He joined forces with a team from the Army Air Forces, and they set up a secret laboratory at an airfield in Carlsbad, New Mexico, right in the heart of Bat Country. Their defiance was not against a human enemy, but against the fundamental unpredictability of the animal kingdom. They were trying to create a precision weapon out of creatures that followed only their own ancient instincts. In hidden hangars, they worked tirelessly, their days filled with the squeaks and flutters of thousands of bats trying to solve problems no military manual had ever contemplated. This is where we get into the nerd stuff, the surreal engineering of the bat bomb. The central challenge was the miniature incendiary. Fieser's team developed a tiny capsule weighing just over half an ounce. It was a transparent plastic shell filled with thickened napalm with a spring-loaded firing pin held back by a thin copper wire. The timer was a simple, cruel piece of genius. A slow-burning chemical fuse would eventually eat through the wire. Once the wire snapped, the spring would drive the pin into a percussion cap, igniting the napalm. The bats would be kept in a refrigerated state, hibernating. They were to be placed in specially designed bomb casings, each containing 26 stacked trays, holding a total of 1,040 bats. A parachute would slow the bomb's descent, giving it time to open at 1,000 feet and release its living, fiery cargo over a wide area. The first major test was a catastrophic fusion. that nearly ended the project. At the auxiliary airfield in Carlsbad, New Mexico, armed bats were accidentally released. The dormant bats, now warm and awake, did what bats do. They sought dark, sheltered places. They invaded the control tower. They nested under the fuel tanks. They crawled into the wings of parked aircraft. And then the timers started to go off. The base was suddenly engulfed in a series of unpredictable, napalm-fueled fires. A hangar burned to the ground. A general's car was set ablaze. The entire airfield was thrown into chaos as personnel scrambled to put out mysterious fires erupting from every conceivable hiding place. The project, designed to burn down Japan, had instead nearly incinerated its own base. The official report was scathing. It was a fiasco, a multi-million-dollar joke. The bat bomb seemed dead, a victim of its own uncontrollable nature. The aha moment came from humiliation. As they sifted through the ashes of the Carlsbad airfield, the project leaders made a critical discovery. The bats hadn't failed, their deployment had. Releasing them at ground level was a fatal flaw. The bats, disoriented and cold, simply sought the nearest shelter, the base itself. The solution was counterintuitive. They had to drop the bats from high altitude in their hibernating state and allow them to awaken and disperse during a slow, parachute-assisted descent. This would give them time to orient themselves and fly toward the city below, not the plane above. It was a matter of physics and biology, not just explosives. They redesigned the entire deployment system, creating a more reliable, temperature-controlled bomb casing that would open at the precise altitude to maximize dispersal over the target. The real test came in the summer of 1943 at a specially constructed, full-scale simulated Japanese village built at the Dugway Proving Ground in Utah. This Japanese village was built with authentic materials, wood, bamboo, and paper, shipped from California. The bat bombs were loaded onto a B-25 Mitchell bomber. The tension was immense. This was the moment of truth. The bomber flew over the test range and released its unique payload. The parachutes deployed, the casings opened, and thousands of bats, now awakening from their chilled slumber, fluttered out into the daylight. They descended upon the model village like a dark cloud, and true to their nature, they vanished into the nooks and crannies of the buildings, hiding in the eaves, attics, and walls. The payoff was breathtaking. As the timers clicked down, the village didn't just catch fire, it erupted from the inside out. Dozens of simultaneous fires sprang to life in the most protected, hard-to-reach parts of the structures. Firefighters stationed nearby were utterly helpless. They couldn't reach the seat of the blazes, which were consuming the buildings from within. The resulting inferno was far more effective and used a fraction of the explosives of a conventional incendiary raid. One official report later stated that the bat bombs had a potential effectiveness 12 times greater than standard incendiaries. On that day in Utah, a swarm of tiny flying mammals had proven itself to be one of the most efficient and terrifying weapons ever conceived. They had not just started fires, they had created an inescapable hellstorm, proving that the craziest idea in the war just might be the most brilliant.
The impact of the successful Dugway Proving Ground test was immediate and electrifying for the small team behind Project X-Ray. The data was undeniable. Bat bombs were exponentially more effective than conventional incendiaries. The project was fast-tracked, with an operational deployment scheduled for the summer of 1945. The plan was audacious. A fleet of B-24 bombers, each converted to carry hundreds of the specialized bat casings, would launch from aircraft carriers off the coast of Japan. They would hit the cities of Osaka Bay in a coordinated dawn raid. unleashing an unprecedented, unstoppable firestorm from within. The Bat Bomb was no longer a bizarre experiment. It was on the verge of becoming a terrifying reality, poised to rewrite the rules of strategic bombing. But history has a way of intervening in the most profound ways. In the time it took to scale up production and train units, another secret project, one that had consumed vastly more resources and scientific might, reached its culmination. The Manhattan Project succeeded. The atomic bomb was ready. Suddenly, the complex logistics of capturing, housing, and deploying millions of bats seemed quaint, almost archaic. Why use a million tiny fires when a single, sun-like blast could achieve the same psychological and physical effect? The statistics tell the story of what might have been. Project X-ray was estimated to be 12 times more cost-effective than conventional bombs, with the potential to burn down 100% of a target city, compared to the 50% typically achieved by high-explosive raids. But in the face of the atomic age, cost-effective and potential were no longer the primary metrics. The Bat Bomb was canceled in mid-1945, its funding and personnel redirected, its story relegated to a bizarre footnote. The legacy of the Bat Bomb is not found in a weapons inventory, but in the very concept of asymmetrical warfare. It was a precursor to bio-inspired engineering, an attempt to harness nature's own design for military purpose. While the bats were never deployed, the principle of using small, distributed, and unpredictable agents to create chaos was born in those Carlsbad hangars. It was a weapon of pure ingenuity, born from a dentist's observation and pushed to the brink of reality by chemists and engineers who refused to laugh at a crazy idea. It stands as a testament to the sheer breadth of American ingenuity during the war, a path not taken, a silent swarm that never fell. The Bat Bomb remains one of history's most captivating what-ifs, a bizarre, ingenious, and ultimately sidelined idea that became a true war relic. What other forgotten weapons of World War II, born from sheer desperation and brilliance, were lost to the march of bigger and more destructive technology? Share your most fascinating finds in the comments, and subscribe to The War Relic to uncover more stories of the strange and secret tools of war.